Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today. I am streaming with you, to you, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Click that bell so that whenever we come up live, you will get notified. Please join me on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only page I've got that you can join, everybody. So please join me there, Santita Jackson and Friends. And of course, at Santita J, that's my handle on X. Please meet me over there and let's have some conversations. Okay. We are in the midst of election 2024. And it's turning out to be an exciting season, everybody. Exciting in ways that maybe we could not have anticipated. Who could have anticipated the fight over ceasefire? Who could have anticipated that? Who could have anticipated the growing dissent? Who could have anticipated that Joe Biden, after getting 80 million votes in 2020, would be fighting for his political life? That he really would be looking at really an unrivaled unpopularity in modern times. How did we get here? How do we get out? Should the Biden White House be concerned about the rising tide of unpopularity that he faces? Should they be concerned about growing dissent? Should they be concerned? In many television, many news reports show us that what they're planning to do, what the White House is doing, they're trying to have smaller events. They want to vet the people who are at the events. They only want people who are fans. They don't want people who are going to be critical at the events. What is that the answer? Is that the answer? Will that help him? He has moved slowly, painfully on ceasefire. He said one thing publicly, and then we find that he says to Bibi Netanyahu, look, I'm not trying to push you out of office. Okay, I want a ceasefire, ... for 6 weeks. We've got to talk about this. What is going on as we are heading to the convention here in Chicago? Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, you're going to be here rolling out the red carpet. You know, we're going to have a good time. Mr. Alpha Phi Alpha, all these alphas are with me today. I love it as a Delta. I love it. Reverend Dr. Todd Geary. Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, part of the national leadership team of Rainbow Push, the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Darrell Jones, one of the leading advocates for the vote and for our civil rights in the country today. Indeed, you can hear him and Barbara Arnwine on their own radio show on the iconic WOLDC radio station at 12 noon every Tuesday. You're an elected official, Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds. And you are a member in good standing of the Democratic Party. And it is your charge to go to the voters and sell this ticket. And not just a ticket. I mean, I think, we've talked about this, Reverend Dr. Uri, we've talked about this, Attorney Darrell Jones. There's more than the bright, shiny thing up top. Everybody's looking at the presidency. But where we live, we live with our mayors, we live with our alders, we live with the county officials, we live with the state officials. Indeed, it's the states that determine the presidents. I mean, you have a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous amount of power. First of all, what are you hearing? I'm hearing that after the State of the Union address, President Biden, people were relieved more than anything that he gave a really solid address. But relief is not joy. And his unpopularity is still what it is. And yet he's been able to raise a lot of money. It just seems a little contradictory. But how do you campaign in this moment? Well, should they be concerned? Should the White House be concerned?
Santita, it's great to be on with you and my fraternity brothers. I'm excited about this show. This is a all-star alpha lineup, so it's great to be on with two great, distinguished alpha brothers. Our founders will be very proud that we're on with this distinguished, devastating diva, Delta Sigma Theta. Listen, the White House and President, that's right, yeah. President Biden should be very concerned. I'm out there, not with the talking class, but with regular folk when you go to the barbershop, when you're in the hood and just having shop talk, and you go to a game, or you are, having casual conversations at the grocery store. I like to be in the community. That's why you get a real pulse. I don't have to look at the polls. I can listen to people on the street. And there is a lot of concern about President Biden. It is real. It is not a theory. This is actual concerns from African Americans that didn't have concerns previously. So he has these poll numbers that you hear about, from anywhere from 17 to 25% African American drop off is real. They feel like Biden has taken them for granted, particularly Black men. I haven't heard as much discontent with African American women, but Black men, my brothers, I've had sit down conversations where many of them, right down today, I've had to talk them off a cliff that they shouldn't be supporting Cornel West, our frat brother, who I have a great deal of respect for in academia, but I don't think that he's the right person at the right time right now for president. But they are saying we can't support Biden in good conscience for several reasons. One of the main reasons that you kind of touched on was his lack of support for pushing and calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. They are terribly disappointed, especially the young brothers, that and not even talking about my Muslim brothers. I'm talking about Christian Black men that said that it's a shame that President Biden doesn't have the courage to stand up to Netanyahu and demand a ceasefire to the war in Gaza, where too many, or approximately, 30,000 Palestinians have died. They said, why is he palling around with Netanyahu? They're saying, what has he done for African American men? They question him taking the Black vote for granted. They question that he hasn't done enough. Specifically, he's not had conversations about reparations. He wasn't pushing directly to pass, for example, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He didn't push Manchin and Sinema enough when it came to ending a filibuster to pass that civil rights, that voting rights legislation. So I talked to many African American men that are very disenchanted with Biden, not just for his age, but for some of the policies that they think and his positions, that he hasn't used his bully pulpit to push a strong Black agenda. And so they're very, that's real, and that's not rhetoric. And this election is going to come down to a handful of swing states. We're not talking about a popular vote. Biden will win the popular vote against Trump, but it's going to come down to 6 or so swing states that he's going to need to carry. And those swing states, if you have 17 to 25% of the Black vote, there's a large number of Hispanic vote, that if that vote goes to Trump, if they do what Snoop Dogg and some other rappers have done and go to Trump, then Biden is going to lose. That is what's scary. So yes, it's real. It's not rhetoric. And I think they are seeing and having a wake-up call now, where they're trying to recalibrate. They're trying to get their messaging out there. They're trying to do ad buys, things that they should have been doing. They need to be putting money into Black media. They need to be putting money and resources in the Black community to make sure that they are getting the message out of what they've done in the Black community and for the Black community.
Do you feel that you're being heard?
I think that they're reactionary. I think that they are now, it's a wake-up call. These numbers are real. The Michigan uncommitted vote, that got real for them. When they see Biden numbers decreasing and Trump's numbers increasing, it gets real. So yeah, I think that we have their attention. I think that they are elevating the DEFCON 4 button to know that this is do or die, that they can't wait till after Labor Day, when traditional campaigning starts, that they're going to have to start early and often in order to change the paradigm. This has been a slippery slope that's been happening for years and is built up to now. And this, again, the ceasefire is the latest in a number of things that people are disenchanted with. Like, for example, I've heard people say, well, we've heard him want to give money for this and that, but there's never been a talk of reparations. So there's a lot of things that Biden has done. There are things that maybe he hasn't articulated as well, and there are things that he needs to improve on. But I do believe that we have his attention. I believe that the DNC, I saw Jamie Harrison not long ago in Texas, and I saw him recently in LA at the Image Awards. I think they realize that this is real, and Chuck Schumer realizes that it's real. In order to hold on to the Senate, they're going to have to get African Americans reignited, reinvigorated into the Democratic Party, and to make sure that they vote at the top all the way down, as you said, local elections, down ballot. So this is real. The Congressional Black Caucus knows it's real. The House Democratic Campaign Committee, if they want to take over the House and we get a speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, to make history as the first African-American speaker, then they're going to need a robust African-American turnout. They can't have even African-Americans say, yes, we're voting, but we're not voting in high numbers. They need the youth, the young, the millennials, the Gen X. They need them to be fired up. And right now, they're not fired up. They're really disenchanted. And even if they don't vote for Trump, if they vote third party, or they don't vote, or they undervote, that's going to be enough to cause Biden to lose. So this is a wake-up call for Biden and his administration and his campaign team. Former President Obama, he said it earlier that he was disappointed that they hadn't been as intentional, and I think he put a spark. So I think that they have finally gotten the message, and they are starting to do something about it.
We're talking with this tremendous panel led by Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, talking about what's happening in election 2024. Should the Biden administration be concerned about the lack of enthusiasm? Should they be concerned about the growing dissent? Should they be concerned about more and more people who are looking at the third party option? Because Representative Reynolds, they are looking at that and they are serious about it. Because as you said, this didn't start yesterday. And I think it's a mistake, and they continue to make it all the time. They think that this just started. This discontent has been ongoing for decades, and we can't. And people have historical memory, and we've got to. They have to get real about that. Well, we've got a Reverend Dr. Todd Urey on with us. Of course, we've got Attorney Darrell Jones, and we're joined by the Dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project, and interestingly enough, he is senior advisor to Dr. Cornel West in his campaign, and one of the founders of Operation Push. And so let me let you speak to that, because Texas State Representative, I don't want, why don't you, because he just got on, why don't you just kind of give him a snapshot, a thumbnail sketch of what you said about talking to these voters and saying, wait a minute, now is not the time to exercise that third party option. State Representative Reynolds.
Well, I was just saying that in my humble opinion, until things change, I mean, hypothetically, independent can win, but the reality is this is a two-person race. Either it's going to be Biden or Trump, Democrat or Republican. An independent third party is unlikely to be a catalyst to win enough electoral votes. They can win and take votes away from the popular vote, but in terms of the electoral college, the way that we elect presidents, it's a two-person race. And in my honest opinion, Biden has not done everything that I would like him to do. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but the alternative being Trump would be catastrophic. Having the ability to have another Supreme Court justice that's a lifetime appointment, having the ability to appoint more recalcitrant, racist federal judges on the bench that are going to continue to roll back voter protections that we've gained over the years, having a person that could be the leader of the free world that is against women's reproductive rights, against access to the Voting Rights Act, against Affordable Care Act, and I could go on and on. but that would be a disaster. So in my humble opinion, I think it's critical that we put our support behind Biden, even though I'm not pleased that he hasn't called for a ceasefire, even though I think there's a lot of things that we can do to improve him. He is on his worst day so much better than Trump would be on his best day. And that is why I'm hoping and praying that the Biden administration will do everything they can to do more outreach in the African American community, not just rhetoric, but they put their resources in the Black press, in the Black media, that they do more while we have us attention to make more commitments and more resources for African Americans, for HBCUs, to put more renewed commitment to pass the Freedom to Vote and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That would be a top priority once they get reelected in a blue trifecta with the House and the Senate. So that is, and then say, well, you know what? This nonsense about the filibuster, we are going to push this. If we have a Democratic Senate and we have a Democratic House, you need to pass this voting rights legislation that's critical to our country. So I want to see more from President Biden. And I think now is the time to get his attention and galvanize our base support, even though he's done many things that he not to our liking. I think that the alternative being Trump would be it would set us back for generations. When we already seen the Supreme Court gut Roe versus Wade, we already seen the Supreme Court end race-based submission. We've seen diversity, equity, and inclusion programs ended in Texas and Florida. I think there would be a national move by a President Trump to end race-based everything when it comes to businesses and procurement, historically underutilized businesses, minority business enterprises. I think Trump would do so much disaster for African Americans, and we can't afford a second Trump term. That's why I believe we have to do everything we can to put our support behind Biden for a second term, and then do our best to make sure that the next election cycle we have a stronger, more progressive candidate that we can offer up.
Dwight McKee?
He's had 4 years, Doc, to do all of that. Michael Jackson made a song say, "Now that I see you in his arms, I want you back." No, Doc, you had 4 years to do all that. And so there is no commitment to Biden. And the people are looking seriously at Trump because Trump is all that you say that he is. But people are just so uninspired by Biden. And the fact that Biden has said these 4 years to do much of what you said he is going to promise to do in the next 4 years, I'm not sure people are going to buy that, particularly on the Arab side. And that's where his biggest problem is going to be, is the young people in the Arab crowd, because his position on the war is untenable. And giving Israel the license to do what they're doing to the Palestinians is for most Palestinians unforgivable. And so he'll just say Trump is all of that in a bowl of grits. But people want to send a message to say we're tired of being used, tired of being taken for granted. And we can't keep saying next year, next year, next year, next year.
Are you eating grits?
Sorry about that.
That's all right, sweetie. But we hear you. I mean, because you know what? There are red lines that these young people, the Generation Z, Representative Reynolds and Reverend Dr. Uri and Attorney Jones, they're saying there are red lines that you've crossed it. And this is unforgivable. I mean, and when you see a Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, her grandmother's in Gaza. For these people, this is not academic. And Ralph Nader has estimated that not 31,000 people have been killed, but more than 200,000. And then you had Jared Kushner in an interview yesterday say Gaza is going to make some beautiful beachfront property, and we need to finish the job. I mean, and that's been said, and Biden hasn't done anything to refute that, to counter it. And I think shrinking the size of the audience, the in-person audience, that's not going to do it. Betting who's gonna be at the event, that's not gonna do it. This ain't 2020. You got to get out here and hit the bricks with these people. And like you said, you, State Representative Reynolds, you are out here in these streets and you're talking to people and you're like, whoa, I'm having to call people off the wait a minute. They are walking the plank and they are like, I don't care. I see the waters are choppy. And I don't know what's in the waters. There might even be some alligators and sharks in there, but you know what? This ain't working for me over here. And I think, and we've got to have that discussion, and we've got to be free enough to have that discussion, so something can be done. Not just having him kumbaya come by here, but when are we going to have a change in policy? Attorney Daryl Jones, because you are out here registering voters and talking to people too.
Well, Santita, it's really interesting to listen to all of the arguments. I had the opportunity, as Dwight knows, to go and listen to Brother West, Professor West, as he was on the campaign trail here in the district. But I just, part of the reason I have the bow tie on today, I just came from a meeting in D.C. with two Israelis that were meeting at the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, talking about what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Israel. And interestingly, the two Israelis with whom we were meeting, one of which was an elected official, is Palestinian and Israeli. So she's a Palestinian Israel, and the other one was a Jewish Israeli. And one of the things that came out of that was this, is that all the discord, all the disconnection, all of the inability of the United States Congress to be able to put forth meaningful policy and funding for Israel for what's going on now is having a direct impact in Israel with regards to how they don't get together. They're watching to see what the United States is doing with regards to Israel, how it's treating Israel, and they're seeing the confusion. They're seeing the animus that's there between the parties, and that's not securing those that are in Israel that are pro-Palestinian or trying to move toward the two-state solution. It's not empowering to them. It actually detracts from what they're doing and ends up giving Netanyahu more power, right? Because what's being fed into them, and again, I never considered this analysis until I just came out of this meeting, but what's being fed into a lot of the Israelis, the Jews in Israel, is that they need to keep the finger, the thumb on the Palestinians before their own safety. That they can't do anything because they're afraid of everything. This is why we need the United States. This is why we need the weapons. This is why we need to continue to strike them. So when we start, and I start the analysis of going into the President Biden problem, I think this problem perhaps goes even deeper than what we may know with regards to what's happening with the whole Gaza issue. Clearly, when we start talking Gaza, we're certainly talking about the under 40s, right? The Gen Zs and those under 40. There's no way they're in favor of any of the policy positions that the Biden administration has put in place. And so one question that becomes of them: can you win them back? Are they gone? Are they forever gone? And is the long-term strategy for them, and in the Biden mindset, is the long-term strategy that I don't believe they'll go to my alternative. I don't think they'll go to the alternate. What is it that Biden likes to say? Don't compare me to God Almighty, compare me to the alternative, right? And I think that's part of the analysis that he's putting in place, is that those young voters will eventually come home. I don't believe it's accurate. I don't think they're going to come out to vote for Biden, because this for them is a moral question. It's not a political question. It's a question of right and wrong, and they can see themselves in the 11,000 children that have been killed in the Gaza area. So I think that's a major question that certainly is being placed there for the Biden administration on the ceasefire. And I think that, interestingly, as Representative Reynolds was raising up, they talk about the black drop off for the election, the 17 to 25% that won't be supporting President Biden for this election cycle. I caution us because, somehow, and Santita, you certainly know this, Black women got blamed for so much when it comes to elections. Say, oh, you're not voting enough, you're not pushing enough. And now it's almost like, I don't want them to set the stage and say it's Black men now. It's Black men that's not voting enough.
Black people are voting. Black
Black
people are voting, and Black people are being disappointed, and Black people are tired of that. How about that?
And that's a valid point. But the concern is, I don't want the analysis to be at the end of this 2024 election that Biden lost because Black men didn't support him, right? Or that Trump won because he won Black men, right? And leaves everybody else out of that analysis, like white men had nothing to do with any of this, white women had nothing to do with any of this, that that it was a Black man, it was a Black problem, is the reason why Biden didn't win that election. And the last thing I want to lift up, because this was just super for me with regards to this election cycle and why African Americans, if for no other reason, should support a candidate, and then we're nonpartisan, but support a candidate that certainly is in our best interest. And that is, it is all likely that if former President Trump wins the election, that Clarence Thomas then steps down and he gets to appoint another justice on the Supreme Court. So you're no longer looking at 6-3, you're looking at 7-2, and the amount of damage that could do to this country with regards to those policies and principles that come from the court are just incredible.
Because I just saw now there are calls for Sotomayor to retire. So it's really, we're living in very interesting times. Reverend Dr. Yuri?
So I think part of our challenge is we've got the frame wrong. Issues motivate reactions. Agendas motivate movements. And what we seem to be doing is trying to figure out how we practice issue isolation, right? How do we create these noise pockets to kind of give us something to navigate off of? I went back and looked at the primary performance in the run-up to President Obama's run for a second term. And quite honestly, the primary turnout was similar. The reason is because the mindset of trying to figure out when is early voting, am I going to take time to go vote on election day for a primary that in the minds of many folks is really kind of inconsequential until we figure out who are going to be the gladiators in the arena, is part and parcel of not so much what's the noise about the primary. Are we going to get an agenda that is going to speak to the necessary motivations for folks to participate in the run up to November? And that's where I think we kind of got to figure out what's happening. And the administration has to figure out, which has always been the complaint. We've talked about it now for years, Santita, since the administration first came to office, is their messaging. They're speaking to the real concerns of everyday people has been amiss. And I think where President Biden has missed woefully is too often he has tried to assign Vice President Harris to be the Black folks proxy, to be the brown folks proxy about the issues that are relevant. So what does he assign her? He assigns her off the bat the immigration issue on the southern border. Aside for a little bit of presence during the run for Reverend Senator Warnock, another alpha, by the way, to run for his 6-year term.
I'm going to stand up for Omega Psi Phi, my dad and my brother. I'm going to do that right now. I just had to say that. Okay, go on, Mr. Alpha.
I'm not mad about it, but the evidence is what the evidence is, right? So we Dr. King was an alpha. I'll leave that right there.
Wait a minute, and the good governor of Virginia was an Omega. My father ran.
We appreciate that, but too, and whether you're alphas or omegas or kappas or deltas or AKAs or zetas or sigmas, the fundamental issue for all of the related, and I don't want to leave out a sigma gamma rho or iotas. Let's put everybody in the mix. The reality is the one thing they have in common: Zeta Phi Beta. We've got the issue that being Black in America still has a consequence. being Black in 21st century America still has a consequence. And it is showing up in the regression that we see in the erosion of federal law and its protections, because when we disengage from who's making the appointments to the bench, you have the consequence that while everybody's talking about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and that has a significant impact on women's reproductive rights, the other issue that we have to pay attention to for Black folk is the reality that what has been the thorn in the side of white structural racism is Brown versus Board of Education. And if you think about what question has been asked of every Supreme Court nominee coming before or coming from a Republican president doing the nominating, is the question of whether or not Brown versus Board was rightly decided and is it still good law? And go back and look, and you will see that every nominee has punted or obfuscated on the answer. Now, here's why that is particularly important. If we go back to a legal framework based on Plessy, separate but equal, based on the reality that, as we see in Alabama, Governor Kay Ivey just signed a state law that precludes state institutions, public entities, and agencies from advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is a prohibition by law. If we do not have a federal legal framework to protect those interests, if we do not have a firewall with Black voter participation protecting against those interests in state houses, Rep. Ron Reynolds is in the new Confederacy capital, better known as Texas. They are coming, trying to actually circumvent the ability of the federal government to deal with immigration. That challenge is still playing out in the courts. Imagine if this Supreme Court gives a state governor the ability to encroach on federal responsibilities around certain enforcements. That then means, hear me when I tell you, new slavery is now endorsed in America by law. You won't have shackles. What you will have is the absence of process and protections. And that goes directly to how we engage. So whether or not it's not to say who you're going to vote for. It is, are we mustering the movement to say we're voting? We're not yet decided who we're voting for. So let's have a conversation, both sides, about the agenda. And so we don't get into this let's make a deal game show mentality that all we can pick is what's behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. No, all of the doors belong to us. We all have a say, and it's not that I just get to choose a thing to determine what's going to be my motivator. My whole concern is the agenda. I want to know what's going to happen in education. I want to know what's happening in terms of employment. I want to know what's happening in terms of police reform and voting rights protections, and making sure that we have racial equity and access in all government agencies that rely upon public funds. We need to have answer D, all of the above, not what thing is going to be behind one of the other choices as if we only get one option. No, our vote actually guarantees us to choose an agenda and not just be isolated to an issue. And until the administration figures it out, because he now has a record, that's the other issue. Trump has a record. When you compare the records and all of the others that are going to be part of the process, where you're going to get a change in the agenda is if you create critical mass a la Reverend Jesse Jackson at the Democratic National Convention, where the rules got changed because he galvanized momentum. He didn't have the majority, but he certainly had a critical mass to change the outcome. That's how we get to the agenda that's going to mean something for folks who are disaffected and disgusted. But as Reverend Jackson often says, don't get disgusted, get determined. And we have to be determined about getting out in big numbers. Otherwise, our issue ain't coming to the agenda.
And I think what you have to remember about his presidential campaigns is that I got a chance to know Armstrong Williams through the campaign because he was head of Young Black Republicans for Jesse Jackson, because they saw the campaigns in 84 and 88 as an opportunity to be empowered and to have a voice speak to our aspirations, and really I think that's it. I mean, because it really was a transpartisan effort. You know, you were running in the context of Reaganism. We forget how huge a figure, how huge a figure Reagan was, and people were afraid to touch him. And the only person who was not afraid to touch him and group was Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition. They decided, okay, well, you all want to sit down, you want to sit this out, we're going to confront him. And there you have it. And this, so it was really went beyond the Democratic Party. It was never just, it was about our empowerment. This is a horse we have to ride on at this time in history. But that's really, that's it, that's all. I mean, so Dwight, what do you say? Because you foresaw this moment some time ago.
I didn't hear your question.
Well,
Say
my
it again.
question, no, I'm about to phrase the question for you. You foresaw this moment more than 20 years ago. You said the society itself, and and hear this, Representative Reynolds in particular, because you're just really getting to know Dwight McKee. Brilliant and tremendous insights that he's always had down through the years. You said, the system is being gamed as we're watching the subprime crisis, begin to reach critical mass, people losing their homes, as we're watching the Black middle class slowly being gutted, as we're losing these public sector jobs, as we're watching really the gaming of the system. Because trust me, Goldman Sachs going to Nancy Pelosi with a 2.5-page document and telling her, if you do not give me the $770 billion, she'd already given me $20 trillion. If you don't give us this by Monday, we're going to crash the economy. We forget what happened in that weekend and how the communication system for Capitol Hill was broken because Americans were so outraged by Goldman Sachs' demand that they demanded that their congressmen in both houses vote no. They dared Goldman Sachs to break the economy. Do you not recall that happened?
And they got their money, and they crashed the economy, and we lost our homes, and they got bonuses, and that was under the Democrats. And so, we did all we could do. We
What
thought
was
that the
under the
answer was going to be
Republicans,
a
but the
black
Democrats asked,
president.
remember President, then the Democratic nominee, President, then Senator Obama, asked the CBC and Democrats to step up and give them the money. Remember? Because
I remember that when the whole nation said, don't give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that people really have gotten to a point where they put all of their heart, soul, and mind into the process. And they look for hope and change. And all they got was hope. They never got to change. And so now they're at a point where it really does not matter so much to them as who's in the White House. They don't have, you're not going to be able to scare them into a choice of two evils. Now, for many of them, it's just a moral choice or a convenient choice, or who can we cut the best deal with? But the notion of Trump, he's the boogeyman, that's not going to fly anymore. Because they put so much investment in Biden and so much investment in Obama, and was so thoroughly disappointed. And so all of the spoils, or most of the spoils, coming to people other than Black people, that there is just a resolve to not be played that way anymore. I mean, we put Biden in office, we put Obama in office, but the money went to the Ukraine. The money went to Israel. The money went to the migrants. And it's hard to keep telling Black people, just keep waiting. Your day will come. Our day will come. And if we just wait a while, well, we've been waiting 400 years. And so, when is enough enough? And that's why I said that I think this is a whole different situation with Black people now. I think 20% of them are just fed up, and you won't be able to bring them back in this election. I think these young Palestinians are just fed up, and you won't be able to bring them back in this election. I think that these young people are just fed up, and either they're not going to vote, or they're going to go third party, or they'll stay home like they did yesterday in Illinois.
Oh my goodness.
20% vote population in
State
Illinois.
representative,
People just stayed home.
State Representative Reynolds and Reverend Dr. Yeary and Attorney Jones, when I tell you, as I was going to vote, because I typically vote early. I did not vote early. I was like making it to the polls like 90 minutes or so before they closed, which I never do. So I was like desperate. And I was willing to wait in the line. And I was like, because it's my bad. It is what it is. When I tell you the people, I cannot tell you almost everybody I knew said the election's today. There was no, and then there was no, oh, I got to go vote. There was like, oh, wow. Okay. That was it. And that to me, that kind of disconnection is very, very dangerous, And while I hear you, I hear all of you, they're going to blame Black people anyway, because what they do is try to employ scare tactics. And I'm just saying to you, unlike our generation, we fought to get a Black man. Well, with Reverend Jackson, the Black perspective, a Black man in the Black perspective, that's what makes us so proud of him 40 odd years later. Then we fought to get President Obama, because we just wanted a Black man there. Okay, we've had all of that. Those ceilings have been broken, and now we're like, okay, that's not a thing anymore. So now you have people, these young people, because we've had people regularly on the show who are 23 and 24 and 25, who for them, a Black president, a woman president, vice president, that's been normalized. And they're like, okay, and so what? And what am I getting out of this? State representative, that's what you're hearing. Because your first 6-7 minutes, you were like, let me tell you what I'm hearing. And that's why I'm saying, is anyone listening? Because now the people who are in the Democratic Party, for example, Reverend Jackson put them there. And it's almost as if they're amnesiacs. It's like, do you not know what's happening out here in these streets? Get out the Beltway. You're out here in these streets. You're where Americans are. And you're hearing the discontent. How do you help people to, when you hear Reverend Dr. Yeary say, as Ossie Davis said at the first Black Caucus dinner, it's not the man, it's the plan. Come on, y'all. We can't personalize this. There's some things that we need. How do you plan to break on through and talk to young people? Because you are also in one of these states where you got a rainbow. And in your district, you have everybody. What do you plan to say to these young folks and to the old folks and everybody?
That's right. I mean, first thing we have to do is be real. Like, we can't talk in utopianism, like, oh, everything's perfect. Well, you guys are crazy. I don't know why you're complaining. Biden has done, we have to acknowledge the concerns that Dwight articulated. They're real. Like, we can't deny the elephant in the room. We can't deny that Biden has taken a lot of our community for granted. So we have to be real. We have to break down and build trust by acknowledging that there is problems that exist that have been existing for generations. We have to, first of all, address that. Then we have to make it plain in terms of what is the plan and how do we fit into the equation. We have to make it plain in terms of what I always try to do is when we talk about criminal justice reform. I never forget, after George Floyd, we marched and we protested. But I said, if you don't vote in your local election for your mayor determines who the police chief is. If you're not voting for the district attorney, then you're not going to ever get a district attorney that is going to hold police accountable, because they're the ones that impaneled the grand jury, and a DA can indict a ham sandwich if they want to. So you have to make it plain at the micro level of why elections matter at the local level, for your mayors, for your city council, for your district attorney. Then you work your way up in terms of Congress and why you need a Democrat or whoever you're voting for to bring in the George Floyd Police Enactment, the Crown Act at the federal level, increasing the minimum wage. You have to make it kitchen table. They want to know, how is this going to impact me? How is this going to direct me in my day-to-day life? So we have to do a better job of making it plain for them. They want to know how they're going to feed their family, how they're going to keep the lights on. Now, one of the things to Biden's credit is we have a record low unemployment. Black unemployment is lower than it's been in a long, long time. You know, the Inflation Reduction Act, there's some things that he's done right. Investments in green energy. There's some things that he's done right. But there's a lot that he can do to improve. So we need to talk about what he's done, but then we need to talk about what do we want and how do we want to achieve it? And we need to have a Black agenda. You know, I'm chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, and the first thing I did, I said, hey, let's bring our ideas into a moral document. We can't have 100, but let's have 5 to 8 ideas that are our top priorities. This is the document that's going to be our legislative Black agenda. This is what we want to accomplish. So that's what we need to do. We need to be more intentional, stop playing checkers and start playing chess and being strategic, aligning ourselves with organizations like Daryl's, with Reverend Ewer, Rainbow Push, and Black Voters Matter with Cliff and Latasha, and the NAACP, which I'm a national board member of. We need to make sure that we're supporting the Urban League. We need to have a seat at the table with the collective PAC. And we need to say, how are we going to work together to strengthen our Black community and our brown community? How are we going to do this effectively? And then take that message and hold our members in the legislature, our members in the Congressional Black Caucus. We need to hold them accountable. We don't want to hear about chicken dinners and, fancy, galas. We want to know, how are we going to have jobs? How are we going to increase the minimum wage? Because this notion of reparations probably ain't never going to happen. 40 acres and a mule and being paid for the slave wages that our ancestors built the wealth of these white landowners. They built it, but we're not going to have that real conversation. So what are the tangible things that we can do, that we can get? Those are the conversations I think we need to have with the Biden administration to say, here are our demands. How are you going to help us achieve these that are tangible? And I think that's what we need to do. We need to give real specific. We know we want to pass voting rights, John Lewis, and freedom to vote. We know those are 2 things we want to do. We know that people want to codify protections for women to have the reproductive health and abortion. We know those are things. Those are tangible things that we know that people are viable, that we want to see. What are the other things specifically related to the African-American community? That is what I want to see. And that is the conversation I want to have with the Biden administration and this team. If you want our vote, this is what we want in your first 100 days in office. That's the kind of conversation I think we need to have.
I have 1 minute for everybody, literally, as we are about to go. Boy, what a stirring conversation this has been, Reverend. Well, let me go to you, Attorney Daryl Jones, because you and Barbara Arnwine are registering these people to vote, and you're having to have these hard conversations on the ground like State Representative Reynolds is. Oh, I think you're muted. Okay.
And Representative Reynolds, Santita, was right on the mark. I mean, what people want to hear is, how are these things affecting them personally? And when you start talking about the election of the judges, you start talking about the election of prosecutors, that's what I think are really some of the grassroots issues, so the kitchen table issues of the money. How are you going to be able to afford? President Biden had the child care tax credit, which was a big boom for a large community, including the African American community. So I'm in agreement. I think that what needs to happen right now is that there has to be that hard push. Number one, from the administration to talk about their victories and what they've done for the African American community. The first Black president, first Black vice president, first Black Supreme Court justice that's a woman, and HBCU funding, all of that. They need to play that up, but then they need to tell us what they're going to do next. What's the next step? Because it ain't done yet. You just got the ticket. We need to know where the train is going to be going, Santita.
Dwight McKee.
My last song for the day say it's too late, baby. We really did try to make it. It's I don't think it's too late for the bottom. I think from the bottom of politics, I think black people still have an interest and can be persuaded that guys at the basic level, the automatic level, the state's attorney level, the clerk level, I think that they still have a real chance to make formidable change and promises and get some votes and real commitment. But in terms of the Biden administration, that's a wash. I don't think that's going nowhere for black people anymore. I think that's gone with the wind.
Yet another artistic reference. Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, got just inside of a minute.
Just real quick, the most important part of Monopoly is the rules, not which piece you playing with, not what number you're going to get when you roll the dice. Until we understand fundamentally that the U.S. Constitution is a document about monopolizing assets and power, and that's what we're up against, we're going to continue to have these conversations. It does not matter, according to the rules, whether black folks vote or not. It doesn't. Because at the end of the day, if you choose to sit out, slavery's still coming. And so since Brown versus Board, we've had Bakke, we've had UNC, and we've had Harvard, the white folks' version of Brown versus Board of Education. The objective is, can we get back to Plessy versus Ferguson and eventually to Dred Scott? That's the rule of monopoly. It has not changed and it will not. The question is, will black folks endorse it by failing to participate in what it took to get here, which is blood, sweat, tears, and even death?
And just understand that, like you said, in Monopoly, it's neutral. At the end of the day, you play the whole board, all of it. And so it is important for all of us to be involved everywhere. All I ask is for my Republican friends, if you are going to be over there, and that is fine with me, just make the argument that's going to help all of us. And I think that we have to be mature enough in our politics to give people that space. Remember, it was Robert Strauss a couple of generations ago, white man who became chair of the Democratic and Republican parties. White people don't do parties, they do power. We need to understand that. And they do power for themselves. And we need to be mature enough and spiritually grown enough to ensure that everything that we do is going to help everybody, not just ourselves. How about that? Talk about a more perfect union. Come on, everybody. For everybody, not just for ourselves. That's the only way that we're going to win. We only win when we all win. I love you, everybody. State Representative Ron Reynolds from Texas, Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire from Baltimore, Maryland, Attorney Daryl Jones, all of these alphas. I love you. 06 in the house. And the GDI of the panel, as you can tell. Dr. D, Dwight McKee, we ain't mad. I love all of you.
And that's why, Yuri, we don't need to, Monopoly's not the game we need to play. We need to play poker. That's the game. That's the real game we in, is poker. You have to be able to put everything on the line and risk everything and bluff till you either win or lose.
I got to get out of here, y'all.
All right.
Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.